The gang war between the Caruso family and the Volkov Brotherhood had lasted 11 years. 11 years of bodies, burned restaurants, and children who learned to duck when certain cars slowed down on their street. It ended in 45 seconds because a translator, a heavyset woman with ink-stained fingers, and a second-hand Italian-Russian dictionary confused two words. Nobody in that room believed it was an accident, Dante Caruso least of all. And 6 weeks later, he put a ring on her finger in the same room where it all started. This is the story of Mara Volkov, and the two words that stopped a war. Mara was 34 when Dante hired her. She was broad-shouldered and full-figured in the way that made cheap hotel chairs nervous. With dark hair she kept braided tight and reading glasses on a chain around her neck because she was always losing them otherwise. She had a master's degree in Slavic linguistics from Northwestern, spoke 7 languages with the precision of a surgeon, and had spent 8 years as a court interpreter before the contracts stopped coming and the rent stopped waiting. She wasn't looking for work with the Carusos. The Carusos were looking for her. The previous translator, a man named Gregor, had made a different kind of mistake, the kind that got people buried. Dante needed someone who could bridge Italian and Russian with exact scalpel-level accuracy, and he needed them fast. A contact gave him Mara's name. He called her on a Tuesday evening. She said yes before he finished explaining what the job paid. Not because she was reckless, because rent was due. The arrangement was simple and cold. She would attend negotiations when called, translate precisely, and say nothing beyond that, and receive a bank transfer every 2 weeks to an account she didn't ask questions about. Dante was clear on the terms. She was clear on the terms. She was not his confidant, his ally, or his employee in any emotional sense. She was a function, a very expensive, very precise function. For 4 months, that's exactly what it was. What neither of them had accounted for was a man named Felix Rourke, and the 2 seconds in which Mara would make the most important decision of her life. The first time she understood that something was different about Dante was at the Meridian Hotel during the preliminary sit-down between the Carusos and representatives of the Volkov Brotherhood, Mara's own father's family, 3 generations removed and an ocean of violence away. The Brotherhood had sent their lawyer, Pyotr Belkin. They had also sent Felix. Felix Rourke was not Russian. He was not Italian. He was a consultant, a fixer who had spent 20 years inserting himself into exactly these kinds of negotiations, billing both sides and ensuring that the conflicts he was hired to resolve stayed unresolved long enough to keep him relevant. He was lean, well-dressed, and possessed of the specific confidence that comes from never having faced personal consequences. He noticed Mara the way a man like him noticed anything potentially useful, immediately, and as a problem to be neutralized. She was sitting at the far end of the conference table with her notepad when he arrived. He stopped mid-step and looked at her with an expression that wasn't surprise so much as theatrical disappointment.
I know you think you're in control right now.
This, he said in English, loud enough for the room, is the translator Dante brought us. He turned to the other men with a smile that reached only his teeth. Forgive me, I didn't realize we were catering the event as well. The room went quiet in the way rooms go quiet when something cruel has been said and no one wants to be the first to respond. 2 of Belkin's men laughed, short, involuntary sounds, more reflex than amusement. Someone coughed. Mara looked up from her notepad. She did not flinch. She did not flush. She held Felix Rourke's gaze across the table with an expression that a more observant man might have recognized as extremely dangerous. My job, she said in English, then Russian, then Italian, each translation flat and identical, is to make sure everyone in this room understands each other exactly. If that changes, let me know. She looked back down at her notepad. Felix smiled and took his seat. Dante had been standing in the doorway for 3 minutes before the meeting officially started. He had seen everything. He said nothing. He sat down. He opened the folder in front of him, but he did not look at Felix Rourke again for the remainder of the evening. What psychologist Dr. Linda Hartling identified in her research on humiliation is this. Public shaming doesn't simply wound pride. It triggers a survival response in which the target must choose in real time between fight, flight, or what Hartling calls moving against, performing strength under duress to deny the attacker the reaction they need. Mara had done exactly that. She had denied Felix his satisfaction, but the body keeps score regardless. The damage was still there. It simply had nowhere to go yet. The meeting produced nothing except an agreement to meet again. This was, Mara suspected, precisely Felix's goal. He needed the war to continue. She filed that understanding quietly and said nothing. What she didn't know yet was that the second meeting would be the last, and that it would turn on a single word she chose not to translate correctly. The sit-down was held in the private dining room of a restaurant on the west side. Belkin came with his full delegation. Felix was there again, positioned slightly outside the official seating in the way consultants always do, close enough to influence, far enough to deny involvement.
Enough.
The flashpoint came from the Brotherhood side. Near the end of the third hour, a deputy named Grigory stood and delivered a speech in rapid, regional Russian that was clearly unplanned. It was raw emotion, old anger, old grief. He had lost a brother. He was telling them what he wanted, and what he wanted was vendetta. In Italian, vendetta means revenge. In the context of this room, on this night, it meant war. Grigory used the word 3 times. His voice cracked on the second. Mara translated the first 2 sentences precisely. On the third, she paused. 1 second, 2. Then she said, "He says his family has been waiting for a resolution. He says what they want is not more conflict, but a settlement, an arrangement that honors what was lost." She had translated vendetta as accordo, accord, agreement, settlement. The word hung in the air. Belkin looked at Grigory. Grigory looked at Mara. A long, searching look passed between them. The look of a man who understood he had been heard exactly, and that someone had chosen something different on his behalf. He sat down. The room breathed for the first time in 3 hours. Dante's lead counsel, a man named Enzo, who had been in this business for 30 years, picked up the opening with both hands. Within 20 minutes, there was a framework. Within an hour, there was a document. The 11-year war between the Carusos and the Volkov Brotherhood ended not with guns, but with signatures. Nobody spoke to Mara. She sat in her corner and wrote in her notepad and did not let her hands shake until she was outside on the street. She had not made a mistake. She had made a decision. The question, the only question that mattered now, was what it would cost her. Felix Rourke answered that 48 hours later. He was waiting outside her apartment building on a Thursday morning. No men, no weapons, just a smile and a file folder. "You translated vendetta as accordo," he said pleasantly. "I looked at the transcript. I also speak Russian, which I didn't mention because it was more useful not to." He tilted his head. "You understand what that means for you. Belkin's people, when they find out, will have every reason to declare the settlement invalid. You are personally liable for the restart of a conflict that has already killed 37 people." He opened the folder. "Unless you sign a statement saying you were instructed to mistranslate by Dante." Mara stood on the sidewalk in her coat and did not move. 24 hours, Felix said, "because I'm a reasonable man." He left. She went upstairs, made tea, and sat at her kitchen table for exactly 11 minutes. Then she picked up her phone and called Dante's direct line, a number she had been given for emergencies and had never once used. He answered on the second ring. She told him everything, not because she owed him, not because she was afraid of Felix, because she had spent 4 months watching Dante Caruso make decisions, and she knew, with the same linguistic precision she applied to everything, exactly what kind of man she was talking to. She was not wrong. What followed took 48 hours and involved 3 phone calls, a quiet conversation with Belkin's own legal team, and the revelation that Felix Rourke had been simultaneously billing the Brotherhood while working for a real estate developer who stood to profit enormously from the continued destabilization of the West Side. Felix had not been hired to make peace. He had been paid to make peace impossible. Dante presented this to Belkin directly. Then he made 3 more calls. Felix Rourke lost his consulting contracts, his access to every family in the tri-state area, and his office lease, all within 72 hours. There was no violence. There didn't need to be. Dr. Robert Cialdini, in his foundational work on influence and social proof, observed that the most durable punishment in human societies is not physical but social. The withdrawal of belonging, the removal of access. It is older than law and more precise than fear because it doesn't target a person's body, it targets their identity. Felix Rourke spent 3 months trying to rebuild what he had lost. He didn't. The settlement held. 2 weeks later, Dante came to her apartment, not to debrief, not to discuss logistics. He stood in her doorway with his coat still on, as if he hadn't decided yet whether to come in. "You could have kept your mouth shut about Felix," he said. "It wasn't your problem." "It became my problem when he showed up at my building," Mara said. "Before that," Dante said. "You made a choice before that, when you translated vendetta as accordo." He looked at her steadily. Why? She considered lying. She was, after all, someone who spent her life understanding the distance between what is said and what is meant. "Because I read the room," she said. "Grigori wasn't asking for war, he was asking to be heard. Those aren't the same word in any language." The silence between them was different from the silence in boardrooms. It was full rather than empty. "I need to ask you something," Dante said. "The answer is yes," Mara said, "but ask anyway." He reached into his coat pocket and set a small box on her kitchen counter with the same deliberate care she had watched him apply to every decision over 4 months of working beside him. "You haven't opened it," he said. "I can read context," she said. 7 languages. He smiled, a real one, the kind she had quietly catalogued without meaning to, the kind she'd only ever seen when no one was performing for anyone. She opened the box. The ring was simple, no flourish. It suited her. "I don't do anything by accident," she said. "I know," Dante said. "That's why I'm asking." She said yes before he finished the sentence. Not because she was reckless, because some calculations don't require more data. There is something quietly extraordinary about 2 people recognizing each other across the distance they built to stay safe. Sometimes it takes a war ending. Sometimes it takes a wrong word that turns out to be exactly right. Sometimes, if you're paying attention, it takes both. If this story stayed with you, hit like, it's the only way more people find it. And subscribe, because next week's story is about a bodyguard who went silent for 3 years and the woman who finally made him speak.